Hi everybody and welcome to our TNT for Thursday, and today is the day that they've got that meeting up in Bangkok between three ministries which will investigate and discuss if they're going to impose any additional restrictions or precautions on Chinese travellers who are expected to start returning to Thailand from this month. My gut feeling is that they probably won't, but we'll let those ministers get together and hammer out something, which we will probably get in the news later in the day, and we'll report that tomorrow. But today we're talking about elephant tourism specifically, some more prospects about tourism, specifically in Pattaya, and also Marcos, the President Marcos of the Philippines. Whoever thought we'd be saying that name again. He's visiting China at the moment, so a quick report on that as well. All today on our TNT. Well, we'll start today in the Thai Parliament, and this is all over the Cannabis Bill. And Thai PBS World says that the Cannabis Bill is in limbo as the House meeting lacks a quorum again. The fate of the Bumjai Thai Party's Cannabis Bill has been thrown into limbo once again after numerous MPs refused to declare their presence in the chamber, bringing the House meeting to a premature end due to a lack of a quorum. Now, there's probably a few reasons for this. And I think partly some MPs just don't want to be seen to be voting to or against, for or against this bill. And I think that's one reason that they're using the lack of a quorum as a bit of an excuse for not having to actually decide on, basically rejecting this bill outright, which is what the majority of MPs are trying to do. Further in that particular story, the House was scheduled to vote on Section 11 of the bill, which the Scrutiny Committee had proposed for deletion, but several MPs disagreed and wanted the bill to be withdrawn. And I think that's what is trying to happen. But if MPs can hide behind the lack of a quorum, it means they don't have to vote, and that the public then can't blame them if they disagree with their decision. But certainly this bill will be withdrawn if all the MPs get a vote on it. My feeling is that now it'll just run out of time with the current House. It'll be dissolved in the next couple of months. We'll have another election in May. And then I would say that the next government, which is likely to be an opposition government, will basically vote to recriminalise cannabis. And I don't really know where that leaves the whole situation. A lot of people say, well, the genie's out of the bottle. Okay, yeah, I absolutely agree with that. But then again, there's politics and there's policing, and somewhere between the two, they will probably try and put the genie back in the bottle. But we'll let the Thai voters decide on that on the election day. Then a Thai MP from Lopburi saying that he said the bill will not be approved by the House anyway, and hence it should be withdrawn from the agenda. And the Cannabis Bill, which seeks to decriminalise the medical use of cannabis and hemp, overwhelmingly passed its first reading in the House in June last year, but opposition to it has since increased as concerns grow over the recreational or non-medical use of cannabis and its extracts, especially amongst the young. It's become entirely political, and MPs are just using this now as a political tool as we lead up to the next election, as they're all jockeying for position and moving to other parties. So there's a lot more to go in this particular story. All I could probably urge is that you just remain politely discreet about if you choose to use cannabis or marijuana, and just be aware that without any specific rules or guidelines, you could be subject to police pulling you up if they so chose to. Now, let's go to another article about this, and this is from Coconuts Bangkok. Here are the very puzzling 10 things Thailand wants tourists to know about weed. And so they've got a rather snarky article here about the Public Health Department putting out a pamphlet. And I have to say the pamphlet doesn't really help answer many questions, but let's see what Coconuts have written about it. They're calling it an LOL-worthy infographic put out by the Public Health Ministry. And that second paragraph, dubbed 10 Things Tourists Need to Know About Cannabis in Thailand, the English language guide is an officially sanctioned work created by health officials. It's also going to be translated into those other languages. And there it is, the 10 Things Tourists Need to Know About Cannabis in Thailand. Do you want me to go through all 10? Okay, let's just see what we can find. So, just a few more things before we get to it. Of slightly more utility, number 8, which pertains to smoking outdoors, and the guide declares this is illegal. But Coconuts knows better and says which is not actually true. Police can fine people for smoking outdoors if someone, including a cop, deems them a public nuisance and they fail to heed a warning. So, Coconuts, who have been supporters of the decriminalisation, somebody tooting a horn outside, they have supported the decriminalisation of cannabis and made it quite clear on their stance, as has, well, at least one other English language publication in Thailand. The second paragraph there, more than a series of context-free bullet points that do little to explain much of anything. So let's go through them quickly, and you can scroll forward to the next article if you... there is timestamps down the bottom there, by the way. Number 1, transporting seeds or parts of the cannabis plant to or from Thailand is not permitted. Number 2, cultivation of cannabis is legal, provided growers register. Number 3, using cannabis flowers, buds for research, export, sale or processing for commercial purposes requires official permission. Number 4, cannabis cannot be consumed by people under the age of 20 or if they're pregnant or breastfeeding, except under the supervision of medical professionals. Possession of extracts containing more than 0.2% of THC and synthetic THC requires permission. Well, I'm actually very lucky to have one of the THC measuring devices. So you use this and you point it at a bag of cannabis or marijuana and it'll tell you if it's got more than 0.2% of THC. It's obviously never going to happen. Cannabis in food, number 6, is only available in authorised restaurants. Number 7, approved cannabis health products are accessible through specific channels. Number 8, smoking cannabis in public places, including schools and shopping malls, is illegal, which Coconuts disagrees with. And then we've got number 9, avoiding driving after consuming food or products containing cannabis. And 10, those who have a bad reaction to cannabis are advised to immediately see the doctor for treatment. So there you go. That's what that particular brochure covers. And here endeth the current mess of the cannabis situation here in Thailand. So that genie which is out of the bottle is just throwing its arms up in the air saying, I've got no idea what's going on. But the situation will basically continue, I suppose, without guidelines, without a specific list of laws, until the Thai government can come up with something. And that will probably not happen until after the next election. Thank you for watching Tim Newton today. Thank you to our sponsors, 5 Star Marine, for their ongoing support. If you are down in Phuket, make sure you contact them. There's a link in the description below, and they'll be very happy to take you out on a private tour of one of 30-odd islands around Phuket with some of those beautiful beaches and Instagrammable photos. Let's go to our next story, something a little bit lighter. And this is covered from a TikTok video. And Thai Wrath reporters went to investigate in the northeastern province of Roy Et after a video on TikTok went viral. So this is what happened. Pickup truck comes out onto... Oh, you got it under control. So happy to report that there wasn't actually a body in that particular refrigerated coffin, but they look pretty heavy. And probably a little bit embarrassing that it's gone viral, but that's what happens on TikTok, which is certainly taking over the social media world, certainly in regards to videos. And to our next story now, this is a bit more of a focus on what's happening around the region regarding potential COVID restrictions for Chinese travellers. And the Straits Times says, we won't discriminate against any country. This is the Malaysian PM Anwar talking about Malaysia's tighter COVID screening. Malaysia will tighten screening screening rules for all foreign arrivals, according to the Prime Minister. We're going to tighten screening, but we won't discriminate against any country, he said at a post-cabinet briefing yesterday. He said that immigration checkpoints into the country will be tightened to screen arrivals from places with high rates of infections. And the Public Health Minister said those showing signs of infection will be quarantined for further tests. That looks like the only specific thing that they're intending to do, commenting on the extremely low of take-up by Malaysian COVID-19 booster shots. The Prime Minister said about 6 million doses of boosters are still available. The PM suggested that media personnel should lead by example and get their booster shots. So it really doesn't look like they're going to be doing very much at all except for random temperature checks. So not much happening in Malaysia, probably not much going to be happening in Thailand as well. Will be interesting to see how that washes out. Which leads us to another regional story, I suppose slightly connected. And this reported in the Straits Times, red carpet welcome for Marcos and a slew of pacts struck in China. And there is President Marcos and the Chinese President Xi. And there's probably about a whole foot of difference, I would have said there, between their heights. And the story goes on, China rolled out the red carpet for Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Just imagine that we're actually using that name, Ferdinand Marcos, again. Thought that would never happen. With the signing of an agreement to mitigate rising tensions in the China Sea, boost trade, investment, tourism, agriculture, and clean energy cooperation. And the President Xi said they're willing to continue friendly consultation to properly handle maritime problems, given there have been a few kerfuffles in the South China Sea between the Chinese and the Philippine navies. So obviously they're trying to avoid this. An accord was inked to establish direct diplomatic communication to avoid miscalculation and miscommunication over the disputed territories in the South China Sea, claimed by Manila as the West Philippine Sea. So at least it's good that the two presidents are talking and that any future miscalculations and miscommunications can be avoided. You're watching TNT. Two more stories to go on TNT, and on this Saturday we've got young Nick coming back to co-host the program. Next week on our live program on Saturdays we're talking about retirement visas, and we've got a visa agent coming in to answer all your questions. That's on Saturday week. This Saturday, it's just me and young Nick. We're sort of starting to ease towards a slightly different format on our Saturday programs, so I'm not exactly sure where that's going to go, but you're part of it, so let's see where we end up. Going to our next story now, and it's from the BBC, and it's titled Elephants, COVID and Ethics Reshape Thailand's Tourism Industry. Now, I'm going to put a link to this rather long story in the description so that you can have a full read of it, but it goes through a lot of these sort of curly, interesting questions asked about animal and specifically elephant tourism in Thailand. Let's go to some of the main features of the article. More elephants are used for tourism in Thailand, over 3,000 than anywhere else. Unlike other countries with captive populations, those in Thailand are nearly all privately owned. The collapse of tourism during the pandemic has had a devastating effect on the elephants and their owners, who no longer earn enough to look after them. So COVID has had a very big effect on these elephants that were earlier used in tourism hotspots and have now sort of gone back to their homes or anywhere where they can find food. These elephants and their mahouts obviously live for a long, long time. So it's just not a fleeting problem. It's an ongoing problem. Let's go to the second paragraph. Even as tourism starts to recover, another threat hangs over this unique industry. Ethical concerns of how captive animals are kept and trained are prompting many foreign tourists to boycott the elephant shows, which were once a staple of tour groups, raising questions over whether the elephant tourism can ever get back to what it was before COVID. The answer is it probably can't. A lot of the elephant tourism does rely on which particular countries are visiting. Now, for example, some Asian cultures, I know some Eastern European cultures, enjoy these animal shows, and they've just simply got a different attitude to some Western cultures which find this type of tourism now abhorrent. So it's going to be interesting to see how they start to ramp up these animal shows again. And it's going to really rely on the type of tourists that are coming into Thailand and where they're coming from and the cultures and the cultural ethics they have about these elephant shows. There we can see some of those young mahouts riding on what looks like fairly young elephants as well. Now, Lek is not alone. Obviously, there's quite a few anecdotal stories in this particular article. Hundreds of other elephants have returned to Surin from tourist hotspots like Phuket and Chiang Mai, where they made money by performing tricks or giving rides to foreign visitors. And the fourth paragraph, the mahout owners and elephants have all been unemployed. In the tourist camps, the females are kept apart from the bulls, but here we've all been hanging out together and the elephants have been having sex. We don't force them, they do it in their own time. So the population is increasing. That's nice to know. And the second paragraph here, elephants are expensive. An adult needs to eat 100 to 200 kilograms of food each day and drinks up to 100 litres of water. Without any other income, owners like Joy have been live streaming their animals on social media while appealing for donations. Elephants are native to Thailand, but the wild population has shrunk from about 100,000 to only 3,000 to 4,000 in the past. Large numbers were captured and used in the logging industry, but when that was banned in the late 1980s, they started being used to entertain tourists instead. And that indeed is exactly what happened. I mean, these animals can live up to 60 years, and so you can't just say, well, it doesn't really matter, they'll be dead in a few years. They and their mahouts can live long, healthy lives. What do? Well, the tourism industry was obviously an area they could turn to. They can't just release them back out into the wild and sort of wander around aimlessly. They can be quite destructive. I mean, they're big animals and they do need a lot to eat. So a lot of them are reliant on humans to provide them with the food and shelter. And so, well, that's basically what's happened. And there in the third paragraph, a representative of the Thai Elephant Alliance Association says some of the arguments made by animal rights groups are emotional and melodramatic, and believes that ethical sanctuaries can be less healthy because without human beings being paid to ride them, the elephants get fewer opportunities to take long walks. So there's a lot of different perspectives, and it's quite a good article going through the different arguments and issues. There is a link in the description under this particular video today. It's an article by the BBC. And from the Bangkok Post, Pattaya set to welcome more tourists. Phuket preps for influx during Chinese New Year. And the story says that Pattaya expects to welcome more Chinese tourists during the Chinese New Year, which starts on January the 22nd. Phuket has prepared for the return of Chinese tourists after the southern island saw over 6.6 billion baht in earnings from tourists during the New Year holiday. Well, there were plenty of people here. How they know exactly how much they spent, I'd love to know what formulas they use, because it's quite a random comment, really. Initially, so-called free independent travellers, visitors who travel by themselves rather than with tour groups, will arrive during the Chinese New Year. As for those who travel in groups through agencies, they're likely to start visiting Thailand around March, says this writer. This representative from where's he from? The Thai Hotels Association Eastern Chapter, Mr. Sam Pett, said tourism might not grow as much this year as it did before the pandemic due to many reasons, such as recession, which compels people to tighten their spending. But on the bright side, he believed Thailand still had the potential to attract more visitors worldwide. And the second paragraph there, meanwhile, Indian tourists are either postponing or cancelling their trips to Pattaya, as the government now requires them to be tested for COVID-19 before their return home. And besides Pattaya, says this article, Phuket is also another city pleased by the news of incoming Chinese tourists. And the director of the TAT Phuket office said yesterday the easing in China signalled a great opportunity. So both the Pattaya and Phuket tourism associations talking it up and saying that they're looking forward to welcoming back Chinese tourists. So we will see how all that unfolds with the meeting in Bangkok today, when the ministries will get together to discuss if there's going to be any restrictions on Chinese tourists. And looks like we've got the tourism associations greasing the wheels as they welcome back Chinese tourists into the high tourist areas. And with that, I thank you very much for watching today. Hopefully some of that's been interesting to you. And of course, we do this 5 days a week with our live show on Saturdays. And on Sundays, we do something which is usually completely random. I've got no idea what it's going to be this week, but I will by the time we get to Sunday. In the meantime, please subscribe to the channel. Have a fantastic Thursday, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.